Well, good day, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. Well, last week I went on a trip with my friends Kevin and Bill to Arizona. We met up with some of the Typospherians over there, and I came back with this, a gift from Ted Monk. Yes, that's right. It's an Underwood 5. Let's talk about the Underwood 5. Stay tuned. Okay, let's go back a little bit into the history of the Underwood 5, and it starts off in 1900, the Underwood 4 and 5. The Underwood 4 was a 76-character machine. The Underwood 5 was an 84-character machine. It ostensibly has a 10.5-inch carriage, although when I measure mine, the platen itself is about 9 3/4 inches, and it's about 10.5 inches from the inside of this carriage cover frame to the inside of this. So that's probably where they're getting that 10.5-inch size from. Production started in June of 1900, and there were a number of improvements that were made to the basic design along the years. So production started in June of 1900. In 1903, they redesigned the escapement system from a rack-type escapement to a rotary escapement, which is the more common type you see in manual typewriters. In 1907, they come up with an automatic ribbon reversing system, and in 1909, they added the bichrome two-color ribbon feature and the backspacer key, and they improved the paper feed system. Then in 1911, they improved the paper guides, and in 1914, they added the variable line spacer, and in 1915, they had an improved shift lock mechanism, and December of 1920 is when this machine was made. So right before Christmas of 1920. And you have to go all the way up to 1931 when the number 6, the Underwood 6 came out. And then in 1946 is when the Underwood SS and the Rhythm Touch came out. So there's a long drawn out history in the background of this machine that goes all the way back to 1900 in its basic design, which is amazing considering how well this machine still works. Well, one of the more striking features of this particular typewriter is the green front panel, the margin rack bar, and the paper table. But I don't believe this green treatment was from the factory originally. The sticker, the dealer sticker, is the Gallagher Typewriter Company from Culver City, California. And it was a common practice back in that era for typewriters to be reconditioned, perhaps repainted, often by dealers. So I'm suspecting that this was a repaint, especially considering the dealer sticker is on top of the green paint here. So the quality of this green paint is not up to the same standards as a factory paint job. There is missing decals on the Underwood decal, their logo and the word Underwood. It's missing the number 5 decals on the front here and missing the Underwood decal on the front. But nonetheless, it looks pretty nice, and of course this does raise the possibility that perhaps yours truly in the future could maybe get these panels stripped off and professionally painted, although that's a topic for another day. But I will say that I generally tend not to want to do that with old machines because I personally kind of like the look of the history of the machine being evident in its appearance. That's my personal philosophy, and that derives from the fact that different collectors have different motivations, and my motivation in collecting typewriters is really to use them, functional tools for creativity, rather than cabinet queens that just sit and look pretty. Having said that, let's go look at some of the features of this machine. I think some of these might surprise you if you're unfamiliar with the Underwood standard typewriters. Well, let's start on the left side here with some of its features. So on the left side of the carriage, of course, you have the left platen knob, and it has a permanently changeable line spacing clutch. By pulling out the center knob, you can turn this as an infinite variable, and that will permanently change your line spacing. It also has a temporary line spacing change lever here that if you push it forward or pull it up, you'll temporarily disengage the line spacing, but if you flip it back down, you're back to the original line spacing. Then you have the left-hand carriage release lever that you pull towards you, and the line spacing lever is up here on top. It's single, double, or triple line spacing. And the carriage return lever is this lever right here. single, double, or triple line spacing, as you can see there. I think the one feature that I like least of all are the paper fingers. It doesn't have an actual paper bail that runs across the length of the machine. It has this set of paper fingers. These will slide back and forth on this rod, and they have a rubber roller in the middle and this curved metal piece that ostensibly is designed to guide the paper up behind this curved piece, but oftentimes, at least on this machine, the left-hand one, the paper tends to feed in front of it, and so I have to do a little bit of fiddling. Nevertheless, it's okay. Then on the back paper table, there is an adjustable paper guide right here. The paper table itself, there is evidence of the Underwood decals, but they're currently missing except for the W is mostly still there. And the W has a black background behind it, so this is apparently some of the green paint that was worn off, revealing the decal underneath. So it's kind of a shoddy paint job. So we have 4 adjustable tabulator stops. And the way these work is you flip them down, you rotate them down, and then you can slide them around. And then when you rotate them back up, you have to make sure the teeth of the stop engages the little slots in the bar. And that's how you adjust the position of the tabulator stops. And there's a little scale for each one with a little pointer. And then back here below the tabulator rack is the spring motor adjustment. So there's a winding crank where you can increase the tension of the spring motor by turning it clockwise. And then there is a ratchet lever that you can decrease the tension of the spring motor one click at a time. So it's kind of nice having that ability to adjust the tension of your spring motor. Speaking of tabulators, right up here is a tabulator brake shoe. And this is designed to control the speed of the tabulator so it doesn't go crashing to the right side. And this brake shoe was worn down quite a bit, and what it does is it rubs against the back side of this tabulator bar, and I added a piece of adhesive craft felt to the front face of the shoe so it doesn't go crashing to the right margin, and it's more controlled, and I like it that way. It's a good, easy fix. So right here is the right hand carriage release lever, and it's right behind this little hook-like feature on the front of the carriage frame, which makes it quite convenient to hook your finger and operate the carriage release. You have the paper bail release operated by pushing the lever towards you, and that disengages the pressure rollers underneath the platen. And of course the right hand platen knob and the right hand paper finger in place of having a paper bail. There's another feature I should show you from the reverse side here, and that is there is a card guide. This is a little lever that flips out. It's a little metal roller. It's spring-loaded, and it pushes on the center of the platen, and it enables you to put a small card in here, and this is sort of intended to keep the card in place as you're typing. And when you're not using it, you can just flip it sideways out of the way, and it flips out of the way sideways like that, spring-loaded. Probably the most unique feature of the Underwood series of typewriters is the margin system, because the margin system operates in the reverse direction from most other typewriters. So you have this indicator pointer in the middle of the carriage, and it'll hit either the adjustable stop here or the adjustable stop here. So you'll notice when I pull the carriage to the right, I'm moving the print position to the left margin stop. So the left margin stop is actually on the right side of the margin rack. And as a consequence, the main scale goes from 0 on the right side up to 80-something on the left side. So the scale is backwards. But there's also a secondary scale that goes from 0 to 80-something in the normal direction from left to right. Below it, it's in red, and that is indicative of how far you are to the margin stop on the right side. The left side margin stop is the right margin. So the way these are adjusting is you just pinch them and slide them like that. And there's your right margin stop. Here's your left margin stop. Once you get used to this margin stop system, I think you might agree that it is pretty effective, and especially because you have control over the margins right in the front. Kind of reminds me, oddly enough, of an IBM Selectric or some of the daisy wheel typewriters that have a margin adjustment right up front. It's kind of nice having this, and especially considering this was designed in basically 1900. It's amazing that it was so forward-thinking for its time. So one of the features I really like on this typewriter is the hand crank to wind the ribbon. It's a very steampunk-looking sprocket here, a tooth sprocket with a nice handle, and as you can turn it counterclockwise, you're advancing the ribbon in one direction, and if you pull it out and turn it the same direction, you're turning the ribbon in the opposite direction. Push it in, you'll turn the ribbon in the other direction again. So very handy. It works really smooth, has a nice clicky ratcheting feel. It's just really exquisite mechanics. I really love that about this machine. It has that open look to it. Right here is your ribbon color selector, and it's pushed down on the dark colored key. That's your black or the top edge of the ribbon. There's a lever behind it right here that you slide to the left, and that forces it into the middle position, which is your stencil position, where the ribbon vibrator stays down when you type. You flip it back to the right, you'd get out of stencil position and go back to the upper or black position. You have a backspace key on the left, the tabulator key on the upper right, right here. Shift, shift, and notice this, shift lock is on the right side. And on this particular machine, I don't have another machine to compare it with, by the way, but on this particular machine, when you shift lock, you don't actually release the shift lock with the right hand shift key. You have to release it with the left hand shift key. So you can shift with either key, but shift lock gets released only with the left. And that has the consequence that for my particular typing style, I don't have the interference problem with the shift lock key being next to the A key, which is a common key that's often used when typing English, and my little pinky doesn't interfere with the shift lock. I can touch type really well on this machine because the shift lock is over here, and the keys that the shift lock is next to, the cent and the at and the fraction keys, you don't really use that often, especially when touch typing. So I actually like the location of this better than its more modern location on the left side. So as far as the key layout is, you have 2 through 0 on the numbers. You have the quote mark, the pound sign, dollar sign, percentage, underscore, ampersand, quote mark, and the parentheses, and then you have the asterisk, dash, or hyphen, tabulator key up here, and then you have, of course, your regular letter keys, and to the right of the P you have the fraction, the typical on an American keyboard, 1/4, 1/2. To the right of the L you have colon, and then cent and at symbol, and then here question mark, comma, upper and lowercase period, slash, and 3/4 fraction. Well, perhaps the most significant positive condition issue on this machine was the fact that Ted Monk had already had the platen recovered with fresh rubber from J.J. Short, I believe. So it's really nice having a fresh platen. That being said, when I got it home, I did pull off the platen, which entailed removing the paper table, the bar supporting the paper guide, the tabulator rack, the paper finger bar. I had to take off these 2 covers here, and I had to take off the entire line spacing mechanism to be able to pull out the main rod and remove the platen to gain access to the feed rollers. The feed rollers have not been replaced. They are quite hard. I just clean them with alcohol. At a future time, I may take them out and get them replaced or cover them with fresh rubber. In any event, it does feed paper okay, so they're not super bad yet. But it's nice having fresh platen rubber. It really makes a huge difference. That being said, a lot of the work I had to do to it was spot cleaning almost everywhere on the machine, and I had to use quite a bit of degreasing and scrubbing to get a lot of these surfaces clean, which is kind of a fun, meditative kind of work to do. Cleaning typewriters is kind of fun. It takes a while. You know, surprisingly for its age, the bell actually works pretty darn good. I didn't have to do anything to the bell or the bell clapper. It sounds really nice. I did clean, of course, the segment very thoroughly, degreased it, and all the moving parts that I could find in here and I could reach, I did a lot of spot cleaning to individual joints. I took off the entire margin bar, took off the scale, and cleaned all behind it and degreased. I did not take off the keycaps, but I did clean the key tops with some cotton swabs, cotton buds with alcohol, and there was a lot of hard dirt along the edge, inside the edge of the key rings that I had to carefully scrape away. So this leads to the question of, how does the machine operate? What's it like typing on it? Are there any problems, any glitches? How would I compare it to other standard machines of its ilk? Well, first of all, let's load the paper. There are a few issues I see, especially with regards to this left paper finger. Maybe it needs to be reformed. It should go up behind this left paper finger, and what actually happens is it's really going up in front of the paper finger. And so what I have to do is I have to move the paper finger so that it's in front of the edge of the paper pan underneath, and then the paper will feed properly. And it could be because the paper pan needs to be reformed so the gap in here is a little bit tighter. That being said, the paper does feed okay other than that, and the right hand paper finger works fine. The paper goes up behind it just fine. So there's just a little bit of reforming I have to do. But in regards to how it types, it's actually really good. I find the keys quite comfortable to type on, and because the shift lock key is not interfering with the A key, I can touch type quite easy with it. The keys have a very nice feel. What I like about them is from the very start of putting light finger pressure on the keys, you can feel the resistance of the keys. There's not a lot of looseness in the top of the keystroke like a lot of machines have. So the mechanism provides a continuous tension on the keys from the very start. And then you can definitely feel, though, when the key travel starts to engage the universal bar or the ribbon lift mechanism. So right about here is when you start to feel the resistance from the ribbon lift. But it's a very smooth typing machine. I'm really impressed by how good it is considering the age of it. The way these paper fingers end up working is they're really designed for conventional size margins, like at least an inch wide. So if you find yourself typing on really small pieces of paper where you have a narrow margin, the paper finger may not work as well for you because you're going to have to bring it all the way out toward the edge like this. Now, you can run the paper finger in so that this inside surface acts like the paper guide. It's at the same position as the paper guide back here, right? So that'll kind of help guide the paper. But it depends on where your margins are at. Like in this case, I'm using inch margins, and you can see that I'm going to be coming really close to hitting the paper finger with the first character of the line, so I don't want to be too close to my left margin there. Now, regarding the left carriage release lever, I really kind of like the position of it because when you grasp the left platen knob, your fingers are about perfectly positioned to press that lever to move the carriage manually if you need to. And then on the right side, I like it even better actually because you have this hook-like protrusion and you can just hook it and move the carriage like that. So the ribbon on the Underwoods feeds from the front of the spools to the vibrator, and it has this little wire pin on the outside edge. The ribbon threads in front of that little pin, and then it goes around to behind the vibrator toward the platen. It comes around in front of the vibrator, behind the pin, and around the front of the pin. So it makes kind of a little zigzag, kind of a path in order to properly thread. And it does use eyelets at the ends of the ribbon for auto reversing. Well, if you're like me, the single biggest issue with owning a standard typewriter is having the room to put it somewhere, because these didn't come with storage cases, unlike portable typewriters. And you can't therefore just stick them in a closet and stack other typewriters on top of them. They'll get damaged. So you have to find a place to put them. You basically need a table space and a place where you're going to be using it. So that's the biggest challenge for me in my relatively small house, is having standard typewriters. As much as I do love them now, and I didn't always, by the way, I didn't know as much about them as I do now. But here are the two standard typewriters now in my collection, the Royal KMM from 1947 and this Underwood 5 from 1920. And I thought it would be fun just to put them side by side and show you what they look like. Of course, they're two different brands, and of course they represent two different eras of typewriters. The Underwood 5 coming from the early 20th century. Yes, it's 1920, but the origins of it go all the way back to 1900. Whereas the KMM is really an evolution of the Royal 10, but it looks a lot different, a lot more modern. It's fully enclosed, unlike the Royal 10, which was more of an open style like the Underwood, although not quite as open as the Underwood is in appearance. Well, as far as the dimensions of these two machines, the length from front to back, the KMM is 15.5 inches versus the Underwood is only 12 1/8. So the Underwood is quite a bit shorter from front to back. As far as the widths go, now that depends on the size of carriage you have. The KMM has 15.5 inch wide from knob to knob, and on the Underwood you have the carriage bearing rail is the widest part of the carriage, and that is 15 inches. And then the height, it's 9.5 to the top of the carriage return lever, and it's the same, 9.5 here to the top of the carriage of the Underwood 5. So the big difference really, in my mind, is the footprint is a little bit bigger on the KMM front to back for an equivalent width of carriage. And as far as the weight goes, well, I used a modern digital scale, which I'm not always certain is accurate, but it weighed both machines at 27.6 pounds. But as far as these two machines as tools for creativity, I think the big difference is going to be the KMM is a newer machine. The Underwood 5 is an older machine, but of course there are follow-on models of the Underwood 5 going up to the Underwood SS and other kind of machines like that that are going to be newer. A big issue is going to be the condition of it in terms of servicing. It's just like finding an old car in a barn. It might have really great bones. You know, you might find an old Mercedes in a barn, but it's not going to be drivable like a new Mercedes unless you put a lot of money and time into restoring it back to good operating order. That's true with any old typewriter. So in the case of these two machines, this has a new platen. The feed rollers need to be replaced. This platen is not new, but it's not super bad, and the feed rollers aren't too bad either. They both have new ribbons. They both have been serviced, this by an amateur, myself, this by John Lewis, a professional. Yes, the KMM does type a little bit smoother. The keys are a little easier. But I really love the touch and feel of the Underwood 5, and I really kind of like its older appearance. And the paint on this, of course, is a lot rougher in appearance in this particular one, but I really do love the green. The green and black is a great combination. But anyways, you couldn't really go wrong with either of these machines as far as a workhorse typewriter. I mentioned earlier about the shift lock on the Underwood 5 being on the opposite side of the keyboard from where you normally see it. And in the case of the KMM, its shift lock is on the left, a more conventional layout, but it is further away from the A key. It's actually closer to the Q key. So in this case, the KMM also facilitates me to touch type quite easily. Both of these machines are wonderful to type on. In any event, if you're interested in standard typewriters, my advice is find a good one, and you may not have the room to collect 24 standard typewriters. They take up a lot more room. So find a good one and enjoy it and use it. And for my own purposes, this is just Joe talking, is I really like the standard width machines. I don't really have a need for a wide carriage machine. And you see a lot of Underwoods of this era that are wide. They have the frame kind of flares out and a big wide carriage, and this rear bearing rod sticks way out. I mean, if you need to have a huge machine for typing on spreadsheets or whatever they did with them, that's fine. But I really like these compact size old machines. It just makes more sense for the kind of writing that I do. Any event, there's a little review of the Underwood 5. I think it's a great machine, as are machines like the Royal KMM. They were competitors against each other. I think the thing that's really distinctive about the Underwood is the margin system, being up front and being in a reversed order from what you're used to seeing. Some ways I actually like it better than the KMM. I mean, the KMM was the first Royal that had the magic margin, where you could just position the carriage somewhere, flip the lever, and it'll set the margin for you. But what it lacks is a margin indicator. You don't really know where that margin is set to. There's no visible indicator. Whereas here, the indicator is right up front, where you can easily see where your margins are. So that's one main advantage I find to it. In any event, if you guys are curious about these, I'd love to hear your thoughts about them down below. Please drop a note down below, and also consider subscribing and liking this video, because as this channel grows, I'll be able to put out more great content for you. And as always, stay creative and have yourselves a great day. Bye-bye for now.